An unexpected threat. The ship, resolute, drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, a small speck in the endless void. Inside, the crew went about their usual routines, keeping their minds on the simple tasks that filled the hours. It had been a quiet mission so far, exploring the far reaches of the galaxy, away from the usual trade routes and busy space stations. The captain, Commander Alden Hayes, stood by the bridge window, gazing at the stars that seemed to stretch endlessly before him. His face was calm, but his mind was elsewhere, a nagging feeling clawing at him. Something didn't feel right. Alden had been in space long enough to trust his instincts. There was a strange calm in the air, a silence that didn't feel natural. His crew was at ease, almost too much so. It was as if they were forgetting what they were up against, the unknown. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden beep from the communications officer, Lieutenant Emma Clark. "Captain." Emma's voice was calm, but Alden could hear the tension in it. "We're picking up a distress signal. It's coming from the Epsilon sector, just outside our current course. It's not an area we usually monitor." Alden straightened up. A distress signal this far from known space was unusual. They were in deep space, far from any nearby colonies or civilizations. Distress signals weren't something you often received out here. It could be a trap, or perhaps a malfunctioning ship. But a part of him feared something far worse. "Are you able to identify the source?" Alden asked, his voice steady, but his gut tightening with unease. "Negative, sir. The signal is encrypted, but it seems to be coming from an old ship. It's faint, but it's definitely there." The captain's eyes narrowed. A forgotten ship, or one that had been left behind. Either way, it felt too suspicious. They had to investigate. He turned to his crew. "Set a course for the Epsilon sector. Prepare for anything." The crew worked quickly, inputting the new coordinates, but their motions felt slow, deliberate, as if everyone on board could sense the same growing unease. Alden felt his pulse quicken. Something told him they were heading into danger. As the Resolute altered its course, the bridge fell silent. The hum of the engines filled the room, but even that seemed too loud, too intrusive in the quiet tension that hung thick in the air. The stars outside the ship's viewports passed by, cold and distant. Minutes turned into hours, and the distress signal grew stronger, more defined, until it could no longer be ignored. The closer they got to the Epsilon sector, the more Alden felt the unease growing. He knew something was waiting for them, something they weren't prepared for. The ship entered the outer edge of the sector. Suddenly, the entire ship jolted as if a hand had reached out and grabbed them. The sound of alarms echoed through the halls. "Report," Alden barked. "Shields are holding, sir," said Ensign David, the tactical officer. "But we've just detected a massive fleet on our scanners. It wasn't there before." Alden's heart skipped a beat. A fleet? That wasn't possible. They had been alone in this sector just moments ago. Something was wrong, very wrong. The distress signal had been a trap, and now they were caught in the grip of an unknown enemy. "Multiple ships detected." Emma's voice shook slightly as she spoke. They're moving toward us fast. It's a large fleet. It looks like a full invasion force." "Who are they?" Alden demanded. "We don't know, sir. They don't match any known configurations," David replied. "But they're hostile. We can tell from their approach." The crew scrambled to ready the ship for combat. The Resolute wasn't designed for a large-scale battle, especially not against a fleet of unknown enemies. Yet, they had no choice. Their options were limited, and the fleet was closing in fast. "Raise shields to maximum power," Alden ordered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We'll do everything we can to stay alive." The crew moved quickly, fingers flying over control panels as the ship's shields hummed to life. The sudden realization hit them all. They weren't prepared for an enemy this powerful. They had no idea who these invaders were or what they wanted. They only knew one thing: they were vastly outnumbered. "Captain." Emma's voice rang out with fear. "The enemy is locking onto our ship. They're going to fire." The bridge was filled with tension, everyone holding their breath. Alden's mind raced, trying to figure out a plan. They couldn't fight this battle alone. "Is there any way to communicate with them?" he asked. "It's too late for that, sir," David said grimly. "They're already engaging." A massive explosion rocked the ship as enemy fire hit their shields. The Resolute trembled under the assault. The crew struggled to maintain control as the ship swayed and bucked with each new blast. "Hang on," Alden shouted. "Keep fighting, and don't stop until we know what we're up against." As enemy ships closed in from all sides, the Resolute fought back with all its might. Alden could feel his pulse pounding in his ears as he watched the battle unfold on the screens. This was no ordinary fight. The enemy's ships were massive, far larger than anything they had ever seen. But Alden knew one thing for sure: they were not going to back down. The Resolute was humanity's last line of defense, and Alden was determined to protect it at all costs. As enemy fire continued to pour down on them, the captain's voice rang out, calm yet filled with purpose. "We're going to make them regret this," he muttered. "Humanity doesn't go down without a fight." And with that, the battle for survival began. The battle begins. The Resolute trembled as enemy fire pounded against its shields, each hit shaking the ship like a hammer against stone. Captain Alden Hayes gripped the edge of the command chair, his knuckles turning white. The Resolute wasn't made for this kind of fight. Small, agile, and designed for reconnaissance, not head-to-head battles with fleets many times its size. But Alden knew they had no choice. They had to survive, and to do that, they needed to outmaneuver their enemies. "Shields at 60%, Captain," Ensign David called out from his station. His voice was tight with stress, but he was focused. "We can't take many more hits like that," Emma added, her fingers flying across the communications panel. "We need to make a move now, or they'll break us apart." Alden's mind raced. They were surrounded by a fleet of alien ships, large and imposing, their dark, jagged hulls reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Each ship was armed to the teeth, bristling with weapons that could tear through the Resolute in seconds. But what worried Alden most wasn't their firepower. It was the fact that they didn't know anything about these enemies. Their ships didn't match any known designs, and their tactics were unlike anything the humans had faced before. "Captain," Emma said, pulling his attention back to the present. "They're closing in. They've got us trapped." Alden didn't hesitate. "All hands, brace for evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Helm, take us into a hard turn, 30 degrees starboard. We'll use their formations against them." The crew scrambled into action, their training kicking in as the ship lurched to one side. The Resolute banked sharply, dodging incoming fire, the hum of its engines deepening as the crew adjusted their trajectory. The alien ships fired again, but the Resolute was fast. It dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding several shots that would have destroyed them on impact. "Good job, Ensign," Alden said, his voice a little steadier now. But he knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Resolute was quick, but these alien ships were faster, and they were everywhere. "Enemy ship coming up on the port side," David shouted. "They're too close." Alden acted instantly, a plan forming in his mind. "Reverse thrusters. Push us out of their firing arc. Get ready to fire back." The crew responded with lightning speed. The Resolute lurched backward as its reverse thrusters fired, sending the ship skimming dangerously close to one of the alien destroyers. The alien ship fired, but the shot missed by a hair. Alden took a deep breath as he saw their moment. "Fire on their engine core," he commanded. "Target their power source." The weapons officer, Lieutenant Samara, keyed in the coordinates. The Resolute's small but powerful cannons fired, sending precise laser beams straight toward the alien ship. The shots hit their target, exploding in a bright flash. The enemy ship staggered, its engines sputtering, leaving it vulnerable for a moment. Alden didn't waste the opportunity. "Move in," We'll take advantage of their weakness." The Resolute surged forward, closing the distance with the disabled alien ship. As they neared, the enemy ship's shields flickered weakly. The crew's weapons fired once more, piercing through the aliens' defenses and causing a chain reaction that tore the ship apart in a violent explosion. "Direct hit," Samara cheered, her voice full of adrenaline. But Alden wasn't celebrating. The victory felt hollow, knowing that this was only one ship in a fleet of many. They had just crippled one, but how many more were out there? "Captain, more ships incoming," Emma warned, her eyes wide with alarm. "They're closing fast. It's like they're adapting to our movements. They're learning." Alden clenched his jaw. These enemies weren't like anything humanity had ever faced. The tactics they used were unfamiliar, almost as if they were anticipating the Resolute's every move. "Prepare to make another evasive jump," Alden ordered. "We can't fight them all head-on. We need to buy ourselves some time." He turned to David, who was monitoring the remaining fuel. "How much longer do we have on the current fuel reserves?" "Not much, Captain. If we keep this up, we'll be running on fumes in less than an hour." Alden's mind raced, but he refused to panic. They had to find a way out. But no matter how hard he thought, the reality was clear. They were running out of time, and their options were running thin. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered, and the bridge was momentarily bathed in red emergency lighting. Alden's stomach dropped. "Report," he shouted. "We've taken damage to the starboard engines." Samara called out, her voice tight with urgency. "We're losing power, Captain. Shields are down to 40%. The ship lurched again, this time more violently, as another alien ship unleashed a barrage of fire. The Resolute was taking hits too fast for the crew to keep up. "Captain," David called out, "they're bringing in reinforcements. More ships just jumped in. We're surrounded." Alden knew they couldn't keep this up much longer. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. But one thing still burned in his mind. They had to survive. "Prepare to fight to the last," he said, his voice calm but full of resolve. "We're not going down without making them pay for every inch of space they try to take." The crew nodded, their fear replaced by determination. No matter what happened next, they would fight as one, against an overwhelming enemy and for the survival of humanity. And so, the battle raged on. Desperate measures. The battle raged around the Resolute, and Captain Alden Hayes knew they were running out of time. The crew fought valiantly, but with every passing minute, the odds seemed to shift further against them. Alien ships circled like vultures, their weapons striking with precision. The once pristine hull of the Resolute was now scarred with blast marks, its shields flickering dangerously. "Captain, the starboard thrusters are offline," Samara called, her voice tinged with panic. "We've lost mobility on that side. We're a sitting target." Alden's heart sank. The Resolute had always been fast, agile, able to dance around enemy fire. But now it was becoming a hulk, slow and vulnerable. The alien ships didn't seem to be in a rush, though. They were content to wear them down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. This wasn't a battle for survival anymore. This was a countdown. "Captain, I've got a solution, but it's risky," David, the tactical officer, said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "If we power up the emergency thrusters and combine them with the main engines, we could make a sudden jump, slam right through their lines. It'll give us a chance to escape long enough to regroup, but I can't promise we'll come out intact." Alden paused, staring out at the dark void of space. The alien ships were closing in, their weapons primed. They couldn't survive this battle if they stayed in this position. The odds were too great, and their fuel was running dangerously low. But if they made this jump, there was a chance. A slim one. To survive, to keep fighting. And Alden wasn't ready to give up yet. "Do it," Alden said firmly. "We're not dying here today." The crew moved quickly, activating the emergency systems. The tension in the air was palpable. Alden's fingers gripped the chair, waiting for the moment when they'd either escape or be torn apart. The ship shook as the power was diverted, and with a sudden surge of energy, the Resolute lurched forward, slamming through the space between the alien ships. "Engage jump," Alden commanded. The Resolute shot forward, rocketing toward the alien fleet at a dangerous speed. The ship's hull groaned under the stress of the makeshift jump, and the emergency thrusters roared in protest. The alien fleet was too slow to react, too caught off guard by the sudden movement. The ship tore through the line, narrowly avoiding enemy fire as it blasted forward. "We're through. We've made it out," David shouted, a rare note of triumph in his voice. Alden didn't have time to feel relief. They were free. For now. The alien fleet was behind them, but they couldn't keep running forever. They were deep in enemy territory, far from any help. Their fuel reserves were dangerously low, and without repairs, the Resolute wouldn't last much longer. "Scan for nearby safe zones," Alden ordered. "We need a place to restock, regroup, and figure out our next move. We can't take another hit like that." Emma quickly brought up the scanner results. "There's a planet nearby, Captain. It's uncharted, but it's got an atmosphere. It could be our best shot for repairs." Alden didn't hesitate. "Plot a course. Let's go." The crew worked quickly, adjusting the course toward the uncharted planet. The ship was barely holding together, but the Resolute was a resilient vessel, and the crew was even more so. They knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but survival wasn't about comfort. It was about making it through, one moment at a time. As the Resolute glided toward the planet, Alden stood at the front of the bridge, watching the stars streak by. They had survived, just barely, but the real fight was still ahead. They'd have to repair the ship, gather supplies, and face the enemy once again. But no matter how hard the battle, Alden refused to let them go down without a fight. "We'll make it through this," Alden muttered to himself. "Humanity doesn't know how to quit." And with that, the Resolute made its way toward the planet, its crew ready for whatever came next. The enemy's secret. The Resolute descended into the atmosphere of the uncharted planet, its hull groaning under the strain of the damaged engines. The crew worked quickly, trying to stabilize the ship enough to land safely. Despite their exhaustion, their determination never wavered. Alden stood at the front of the bridge, eyes locked on the planet below, wondering what they would find. The planet's surface was mostly covered by dense, uncharted jungles and mountains. But as they got closer, something caught his eye. An enormous structure hidden beneath the planet's thick cloud cover. "Captain, take a look at this," Emma called from her station. Her voice was tight with curiosity and concern. Alden turned to her, frowning. "What is it?" "It's a massive structure, sir. Doesn't match anything in our database. It's hidden beneath the clouds, almost as if it's been intentionally concealed." Alden's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just an uncharted planet. It was a possible treasure trove of information. If the enemy had built something here, it could be the key to their power or their downfall. "Plot a course for that structure," Alden ordered. "We need to know what we're dealing with." The ship shuddered again as they navigated through the planet's dense clouds, but the structure soon came into full view. A towering metallic spire rose from the planet's surface, far larger than any human-made building. Its dark, reflective surface seemed almost unnatural against the bright blue skies. It looked like a fortress, complete with heavy defenses and automated turrets. But what caught Alden's attention was something more subtle: the pattern of the structure, the way it seemed to pulse with faint energy. There was something familiar about it, a hum that felt almost alive. "We've arrived," David said, breaking Alden's trance. "Shields are holding, but we'll need to be quick. I don't like the look of those defenses." Alden didn't need any more convincing. He glanced at his crew. "Everyone, stay sharp. We're going in. Emma, get the communications ready. We'll try to learn what we can without engaging unless we have to." The crew nodded, their faces set in determination. They were already preparing for a possible fight, but the captain's orders were clear: gather information. If the enemy had been hiding something this important, they couldn't risk missing it. As the Resolute touched down on the surface near the structure, the crew gathered their gear. Alden led the way, flanked by Emma and David, their weapons ready but their eyes wide with curiosity. The massive structure loomed before them, an eerie silence hanging in the air. The atmosphere was thick, heavy with the weight of unknown secrets. The air smelled different here, strange, like ozone and metal, tinged with something almost organic. "This place, it feels wrong," David murmured, his hand resting on the side of his weapon. "Like it's not just a building, but something more." Alden nodded, his instincts screaming at him. There was something alive about this place, something beyond the technology. They moved cautiously toward the entrance, where a set of massive, sliding doors opened with a low mechanical hiss as they approached. The doors were designed to open only when they were near, almost as if they were expecting them. Inside, the space was dimly lit, the walls lined with strange symbols and glowing patterns. The floors were smooth, almost slick, as if the entire building had been built for a purpose far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The deeper they went, the more the sensation of something alive intensified. Alden could almost feel the building's pulse beneath his feet. "Captain, look at this," Emma said, pointing to a series of walls that seemed to change as they moved. The symbols on the walls shifted, rearranged like a living language. Alden studied them carefully, his mind racing. "This is alien technology," he muttered. "But there's something else, something more." As they moved deeper into the structure, they came upon a large chamber, an enormous room at the center of the building. At its core was a glowing sphere, suspended in midair by unseen forces, radiating an energy so intense it made the air crackle. The sphere pulsed, sending out waves of energy that vibrated through the room. "What is this?" Emma whispered. Alden took a deep breath. He knew they had found something important, something far more powerful than they could have ever imagined. "It's the heart of the Empire," he said, his voice a mix of awe and fear. "The energy source they've been using. It's what powers their fleet, their ships, everything." David stepped forward, eyes wide with disbelief. "You mean this thing is what's been giving them their strength?" Alden nodded. The piece they had been missing had just fallen into place. This was no ordinary weapon. It was a power source, a device that could bend energy to the will of whoever controlled it. If they could destroy it or take control of it, they could cripple the alien empire once and for all. But just as Alden was about to speak, the room shook violently. The walls began to hum louder, the energy sphere's light growing more intense. They had triggered something. "Get back," Alden shouted. "We've got to leave now." But it was too late. The doors they had entered through slammed shut, sealing them in. The sphere pulsed once more, and with a deafening roar, the ground beneath them trembled. The building was coming alive, and the crew had unknowingly triggered its defense systems. Alden's heart raced as the lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness. The air grew thick and oppressive, the pressure rising as if the very building itself was closing in around them. "We need to get out of here, now," Alden barked, already moving toward the exit. The crew scrambled to follow, but the building was no longer cooperating. The walls shifted again, closing off their path. Something ancient, was awakening, and it was not happy that the Resolute had found its heart. The race for survival had begun again. Into the heart of the Empire. The crew of the Resolute sprinted through the dimly lit corridors of the alien structure, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The energy sphere's pulse had intensified, and with it, the building seemed to come alive, shifting and changing with every step they took. The walls had closed off their exit, trapping them deeper inside the labyrinth. "Keep moving," Alden shouted, his voice tight with urgency. We need to find a way out before this place collapses on us." The crew pressed on, heartbeats pounding in their ears, the walls closing in as if the building itself was aware of their presence. The temperature in the structure was rising rapidly, making it hard to breathe. The air felt thick, almost heavy, like they were walking through a living thing, not a building. "This place is alive," David gasped, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "It's like it's reacting to us." "I know," Alden replied, his mind racing. "And if we don't get out of here, we're not going to survive long enough to tell anyone about it." The strange shifting walls made navigation almost impossible. Every turn they took seemed to lead them to a dead end, only for the walls to move again, reopening paths where there had been none moments before. It was like the building was shifting, adapting to their every move. "Captain, I'm reading something on the scanners," Emma said, her voice laced with disbelief. "There's another energy source, coming from deeper within the structure. It's huge." Alden's mind clicked into gear. If the energy source was deeper in the building, that meant they were heading toward the heart of the Empire's power, the thing that had been giving them an edge over humanity. It wasn't just a weapon, it was the source of their strength. If they could get to it, there was a chance they could cripple the entire Empire. "We're going after it," Alden said decisively. "If we can destroy it, we'll have a shot at stopping this Empire once and for all." The crew exchanged glances, and though fear was present in their eyes, they all nodded. There was no turning back now. They were about to face the core of the enemy's power, and they had no idea what dangers lay ahead. As they moved deeper into the structure, the air grew even thicker, the temperature rising rapidly. The walls were lined with more of those strange symbols, glowing faintly, as if they were watching them, waiting. The crew had no idea what these markings meant, but they couldn't afford to stop and analyze them. They had a mission to complete, and it was now or never. Finally, they reached the heart of the building. The room they entered was unlike anything they had seen before, a massive chamber, at least 100 meters wide, with a dark, foreboding energy sphere suspended in the center. The energy here was overwhelming, an intense crackling force that made the air shimmer. The sphere pulsed with energy, its surface a swirling mass of color and light, constantly shifting and changing. "This is it," Alden muttered, his eyes locked on the sphere. "This is the core, the heart of their power." Emma scanned the surroundings. "It's emitting a massive energy field. It's like a shield. We'll never get close enough to destroy it unless we can find a way to disable the field." "We'll have to risk it," Alden said, determination in his voice. "Get as close as you can, and we'll figure out a way to break through." The crew advanced cautiously, but as they got closer to the sphere, the ground trembled violently. The room shook, the walls groaning, as though the entire building was reacting to their presence. A deep, rumbling sound echoed from every corner of the room. "Captain, look out," David shouted. From the shadows of the room, mechanical creatures emerged, their movements swift and deadly. They looked like a cross between humanoid robots and alien beasts. Tall, with sleek metallic bodies, their eyes glowing red as they advanced toward the crew. "They're guarding the core," Emma yelled, drawing her weapon and firing at the nearest one. The blast hit, but the creature didn't even flinch. Alden's mind raced. The mechanical guardians were far stronger than anything they'd faced before. They were designed to protect the core, and these creatures weren't going to let anyone get close without a fight. "We have to take them out," Alden shouted, grabbing a plasma rifle from a nearby weapons locker. "Do not stop moving. Stay focused." The crew split up, firing at the advancing creatures. The air filled with the sound of energy blasts as each crew member fought back, but it quickly became clear that they were outmatched. These creatures were too powerful, too quick, and their armor was nearly impenetrable. Alden ducked behind a column, narrowly avoiding a laser blast that singed the edge of his coat. "We need a way to disable their defenses," he called out to David. Do you have any ideas? David, panting and sweating, fired at the closest guardian before answering. There's a control panel near the far side of the room. If I can get to it, I might be able to deactivate the shields surrounding the core. But it's going to be risky. Alden didn't hesitate. Do it. We'll cover you. David sprinted toward the control panel, dodging incoming fire. The Guardians moved faster than he expected, but with a well-timed roll, he managed to reach the panel. He quickly began working on it, his hands flying over the controls. "I've got it," David shouted, a grin spreading across his face. "I've disabled the shield." The energy shield around the sphere flickered and then collapsed, leaving the core exposed. "Now's our chance," Alden shouted. "All guns on the core. Fire." The crew poured every ounce of their firepower into the exposed core. The blast shook the entire building, sending shockwaves through the air. The core sputtered, its glowing energy faltering. But just as they thought victory was within reach, the ground shook violently again. The entire building groaned, and the walls began to crack. Something was wrong. The building was collapsing. "We need to get out," Alden ordered. "Now. Go." The crew raced toward the exit, their path lit by the fading glow of the energy sphere. The heart of the Empire had been struck, but the fight wasn't over yet. They had made a powerful strike against the enemy, but they still had to survive the consequences of their actions. The final countdown. The ground trembled beneath the crew's feet as they raced toward the exit of the collapsing structure. The energy core had been struck, but the building seemed to be reacting with a furious intensity. The walls around them cracked, and the ceiling groaned, threatening to cave in at any moment. Alden's mind was racing. They had succeeded in damaging the heart of the Empire's power, but now they were trapped, with only one chance to escape. "Move faster," Alden shouted, his voice strained as he led the way. "We've got to get out before this place comes down on top of us." The crew pushed forward, dodging falling debris and narrowly avoiding sections of the ceiling that had begun to collapse. The once eerie silence of the building was now filled with the sound of explosions, metal scraping, and the constant rumble of the structure breaking apart. Every step felt like it could be their last. "Captain, there's no way we can outrun this," Emma said, her voice tinged with panic. "The whole structure's coming down." Alden's heart pounded. The building's destruction had triggered a chain reaction. The core, now destabilized, was causing the entire facility to crumble. The Resolute was their only hope, but they needed to make it back to the ship before the building collapsed entirely. "We don't have a choice," Alden replied, pushing himself harder. "Keep moving. We're almost there." As they neared the exit, the entire hallway seemed to shudder beneath them. The final countdown had begun. The energy core's destabilization was causing explosions all over the facility, and the air was thick with dust and debris. They could hear the building groaning in protest, the sound of its metal frame twisting and breaking. David was at the front, moving as fast as he could. He turned back to Alden, his face pale with worry. "Captain, I've got the escape route plotted, but we're going to have to make a run for it through the main hall. It's our only chance to get to the ship in time." Alden nodded. They didn't have the luxury of time. They needed to move now, or they wouldn't make it. "Everyone, get ready," Alden shouted. "We're running for the Resolute. Follow me, and don't look back." With a final surge of adrenaline, the crew sprinted down the hallway, dodging falling beams and pieces of metal. The entire building seemed to be falling apart around them, but they kept pushing forward, desperate to reach the safety of their ship. The Resolute was just beyond the main hall, but every second counted. "Captain, look out," Emma shouted as a massive chunk of the ceiling collapsed just ahead of them, blocking their path. Alden's instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, he grabbed Emma's arm, yanking her out of the way just as the debris crashed to the ground with a deafening roar. The impact sent a shockwave through the air, sending the crew stumbling. "Are you okay?" Alden asked, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Emma nodded, her face pale but determined. I'm fine. Let's go. With the hull cleared, they pushed forward once more, their pace quickening. The Resolute was in sight. The ship was sitting at the edge of the massive clearing, its engines already rumbling as the crew prepared for takeoff. But the path to the ship was not clear. They were not alone. Enemies, David shouted. There's an alien patrol ahead. Alden's heart skipped a beat. The last thing they needed right now was a fight. The Resolute was their ticket out of here, but it was still too far to reach safely. We'll have to fight our way through, Alden said, his voice hardening. Form up. We move as a team. The crew fell into position, weapons drawn, as the alien patrol slowly advanced toward them. The creatures were humanoid, but their armor was sleek and deadly, and they were equipped with high-powered energy weapons. These weren't the same mechanical guardians they had faced earlier. These were elite soldiers. Alden quickly assessed the situation. They couldn't afford a prolonged fight. They had to get to the ship, and fast. Emma, David, flank them from the left, Alden ordered. I'll take the center. Samara, cover us from the rear. Move. The crew moved quickly, coordinating their attack. Alden fired first, his shot taking out the nearest soldier, but the others were quick to return fire. The air erupted with blinding flashes of light, energy bolts flying in all directions. The ground shook as explosions rocked the area, and the alien soldiers retaliated with deadly accuracy. But the humans fought with everything they had. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for humanity's future. Emma and David circled around the aliens, taking them by surprise, while Alden led the charge, cutting through the enemy with precision. Samara, standing back, provided cover fire, picking off any soldiers who tried to flank them. The battle was intense, but the crew was determined. Captain, we've got them, Emma shouted, her weapon smoking as she lowered it. We've cleared the path. Alden nodded, his eyes scanning the area quickly. The remaining alien soldiers had retreated, and the path to the Resolute was now clear. But the clock was ticking. The building was falling apart faster than they could move. We've got no time to waste, Alden said, turning toward the ship. Let's go. With a final push, they ran toward the Resolute, each step heavy with urgency. The Resolute's hatch opened as they neared, and the crew rushed inside, the ship's engines firing to life as the countdown to takeoff began. But just as the doors closed behind them, the ground beneath their feet shook with one final explosion. The structure they had just escaped from crumbled into the planet's surface, an inferno of fire and debris, the building reduced to rubble. The Resolute blasted off into the air, escaping the destruction by mere seconds. Alden leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. We made it, he said quietly, but his mind was already on the next step. The Empire had been dealt a powerful blow, but the battle was far from over. The crew had survived, but now they had to prepare for the consequences of their actions. The galaxy had been changed forever, and humanity's fight was just beginning. Victory, but at what cost? The Resolute blasted through the atmosphere, leaving the shattered remnants of the alien structure far behind. As the ship cleared the planet's gravity, Alden allowed himself a moment of brief relief. They had made it out alive, but the victory felt hollow. They had struck at the heart of the Empire, but the cost had been high. Their ship was damaged, their fuel reserves low, and they had lost valuable time in their desperate escape. But despite all that, one thing was certain. They had changed the course of the war. Alden stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes fixed on the stars outside the viewports. The quiet hum of the engines filled the silence, but his thoughts were 1,000 light-years away. The mission had been a success, but it hadn't come without sacrifice. The crew had fought with everything they had, and some were now recovering from the physical and emotional toll of the battle. Captain, we've cleared the planet's atmosphere, Emma reported from her station. The ship's engines are holding, but we've only got enough fuel for one more jump. Alden nodded, his brow furrowed. They couldn't afford to waste their remaining fuel. The Resolute was their only hope, and right now it was barely holding together. They needed a safe place to regroup, to repair, and to resupply. But in the vastness of space, options were limited. "What's the status of the repairs?" Alden asked, turning to Samara, the ship's chief engineer. "We've patched up the most critical systems, Captain," Samara replied, wiping grease from her hands as she looked up from her station. "But we'll need a proper refueling station to fix the ship completely. And we'll need more time to assess the damage." Alden clenched his jaw. Time was something they didn't have. The alien empire was still out there, and the crew knew it would be only a matter of time before they would have to face them again. They couldn't afford to rest for too long. "I'll contact command and get a report on possible resupply points," Emma said, glancing at Alden. "Maybe we can find a station or a neutral zone where we can make repairs." "Do it," Alden replied, his voice firm. "We need to make sure we're ready for what comes next." As Emma worked to send the distress signal, Alden took a seat, staring out at the stars. The Empire's fleet had been dealt a major blow, but they had only destroyed one part of their operation. This war was far from over, and the challenges ahead were greater than ever. The crew had proved they could survive anything, but Alden knew that survival wasn't enough. They had to win. They had to find a way to end this conflict before it consumed everything. After a few moments, Emma turned back to Alden, her face pale but determined. "Captain, I've received a reply. There's a neutral space station in the nearby sector. It's out of the way enough that it hasn't been touched by the Empire's forces. We can refuel and make repairs there." Alden nodded, standing up. "Plot a course. Let's make sure the Resolute stays in one piece long enough to finish this." The crew worked quickly. The ship's course adjusted for the station. As the Resolute moved through space, Alden felt the weight of the last few days pressing down on him. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over, and the losses they'd sustained weighed heavily on his heart. But then he thought of his crew, their resilience, their unity, their unbreakable will to survive. They were ready for whatever came next, whatever the alien empire had in store for them. Humanity had shown that it would never back down, never give up. "We've faced the impossible before," Alden said, more to himself than anyone else. "We'll face it again. And this time, we'll win." The ship continued its journey toward the neutral station, and as the stars streaked past them, Alden looked at his crew. They were exhausted, battered, and bruised, but they were still standing. And with that strength, they would face whatever came next, knowing that humanity's will to survive was stronger than anything the Empire could throw at them.